Hαίrete, friends. Welcome to Classics in Color, your weekly dive into some of the ancient world's wackiest facts. I'm Mark Graves, and today we're going to be taking a look at one of the ancient world's most famous poisoners. Agrippina was a Roman empress. She was married to the Emperor Claudius, whom I have had a soft spot for ever since the BBC show I, Claudius. But Agrippina has a bit of a problem because Claudius has a son from a previous marriage that is older than her son, who will eventually become the Emperor Nero. So she wears down Claudius into changing his will to make Nero his named heir. And after he changes his will, she decides that now is the time to strike. She needs to assassinate him before he has the opportunity to change his mind and go back and alter his will. But she doesn't want to just dump a bunch of arsenic in his wine. If he just drops dead at dinner, that's going to be very obvious that it was her. So let's take a look at a passage from the Roman historian Tacitus that describes her strategy. She decided on some rare compound which might derange his mind and delay death. A person skilled in such matters was selected, Locusta by name, who had lately been condemned for poisoning and had long been retained as one of the tools of despotism. By this woman's art, the poison was prepared, and it was to be administered by a eunuch Helotus, who was accustomed to bring in and taste the dishes. So the Empress Agrippina turns to this lady Locusta, who's this famous poisoner, which one could argue is kind of a bad thing. Probably one shouldn't be a famous poisoner. That kind of curtails your effectiveness. She's a little too famous to the point that she's about to be executed, but the royal family pardons her because they want to be able to use her services. So Agrippina goes to her and she requests a very slow-acting poison that will gradually deteriorate his physical and mental state, eventually killing him, but making it look more like a disease than a poisoning. So Locusta gives her the poison, and it is administered, according to all the legends and the rumors, via one of his favorite dishes of mushrooms. So sprinkled in the mushrooms, he eats the mushrooms, and he does start to feel kind of sick and to experience some symptoms. But then, again, according to all the legends and rumors about the story, he goes to the restroom and he passes some things through his system, and he comes back and he's feeling much better. And this makes the Empress start to feel impatient, a little panicky. Maybe he's never actually going to die. Maybe it wasn't big enough of a dose. So as a backup plan, she enlists the Emperor's physician. And she has the physician go in, and the physician is supposed to treat him because he's still experiencing some indigestion. He's still feeling a bit off. And the physician takes a feather and he's sort of tickling the Emperor's throat to try to get him to vomit up whatever is upsetting him, basically. But the doctor has secretly poisoned this feather, so he's able to administer poison via a feather tickling the Emperor's throat. So unfortunately, Claudius does die thereafter, and we're unable to know who we should blame or credit for his murder, whether Locusta or the doctor. Interestingly, this is not the only murder that Locusta was involved in. Let's take a look at another passage from Tacitus, this time about Claudius's heir, Nero. Nero meditated a secret device and directed poison to be prepared through the agency of Julius Pollio, tribune of one of the Praetorian cohorts, who had in his custody a woman under sentence for poisoning, Locusta by name, with a vast reputation for crime. So I know earlier I mocked her for having a whole reputation and being famous, but I am grateful that people did know who she was, and even more grateful that the historian Tacitus included her name. He didn't have to, so I'm grateful for that choice because it's cool to know who she was, and it also allows me to have this very morbid, dark desire that if there ever is a female serial killer who's able to rival the likes of Bundy, that she might use this as her code name or her alias. But let's return to the story because it's kind of a juicy one. Nero has recruited Locusta to help him assassinate Britannicus, who is the son of Claudius. But Britannicus has a tester who tries all of his food and checks if it's poisoned, so Nero has to come up with a way around this. What he does is he has Britannicus served a very, very hot drink, and the tester tries it, and it's not poisoned, it's fine, but he does kind of burn his mouth. So when Britannicus gets the cup and he sees it's very hot, he does ask that a little bit of cool water be poured in to bring the temperature down, and the water has been poisoned. But the dose is kind of on the low side again. Locusta didn't want him to just immediately drop dead, so she gave him something that was a little bit lower, and nothing happens immediately. So Nero again starts to get a little worried, a little impatient that it isn't going to work. So he calls Locusta in to reprimand her, basically. And let's look at the details of this. So we're going to have to turn away from Tacitus and instead look at the biographer Suetonius. But the poison she gave him, working more slowly than Nero expected and only causing vomiting, he sent for the woman and beat her with his own hand, charging her with administering an antidote instead of poison, and upon her alleging an excuse that she had given Britannicus but a gentle mixture in order to prevent suspicion, "Think you," said he, "that I'm afraid of the law?" and obliged her to prepare in his own chamber and before his eyes a quick and strong a dose as possible. This he tried upon a kid goat, but the animal lingering for 5 hours before it expired, he ordered her to go to work again, and when she had done, he gave the poison to a slave, who died immediately. He commanded the poison to be brought into the eating room and given to Britannicus while he was at supper with him. The prince had no sooner tasted it than he sunk on the floor. Nero, meanwhile, pretending to the guests there was only a fit of the falling sickness to which he said he was subject. He buried him the following day in a mean and hurried way during violent storms of rain. Another interesting detail is that after she finally managed to give him a strong enough dose, the emperor bought her a whole estate where she could live comfortably the rest of her life, and his only stipulation really was that she take on a bunch of disciples and train them up in her poisoning methods so that he would have lots more poisoners in the future, which I think I'm now going to add onto my list of dream jobs, basically being like the head mistress of the emperor's private poisoning academy. It sounds so badass. One final detail that I think is kind of interesting and I want to throw in here at the end is that Nero allegedly had a little box of poison that he could carry around on his person at all times in case he ever needed to commit suicide, because he had a lot of enemies. And I don't think it ever explicitly states anywhere where he got this box from, but I think it's a fair assumption to make that he got it from his, personal poison lady that he kept on retainer. That's a pretty reasonable bet that he got it from her. But what is funny is that when he did actually have to commit suicide because there was a coup to overthrow him as the emperor, and he had to go on the run and he was about to be captured and he wanted to commit suicide rather than be captured, he lost his box. So he didn't have the box of poison on him and he couldn't work up the nerve to kill himself with a sword, to stab himself, so he basically had to request someone else do it for him. So it was just a very sad end that he ultimately met. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Special thank you as always to subscribers and to Patreon members, and I hope to see all of you again next week. Χαίρετε.